Yeah.
Oh, shit.
Why are you not a voice actor?
It's a good question. I don't know.
Are we rolling right now?
Yeah.
This is...
You're listening to the Humble Hustle Podcast with Nick and Kayla.
Welcome to another episode of the Humble Hustle Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Jones, with Kayla Ebner.
Hello, hello.
And today we have a guest.
That's right. We're so excited. We have a fantastic guest in the studio today. He is a very talented animator and editor with experience not only in animation and video, but design and copywriting. So welcome to the studio, Sean Brodeur.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Did I get that right?
You painted a very rosy picture, so I appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here. We're so excited. We were chatting a little bit off the mic earlier. We're going to get into some topics and get to know you a little bit more and just have a great conversation.
Cool. Let's do it.
All right, to get things started, let's kind of just do a little intro. Like who you are, what do you do, how do you know us, and just take it from there.
Cool. Yeah. So like you said, my name's Sean. I'm, I guess what I would call myself is a freelance motion designer. I've been in the industry for probably like 6 to 8 years. It's a little fuzzy, like when you can really consider someone or when you like consider your start, but do a lot of video work. Like I said, do a lot of animation work, a lot of stuff with design, a lot of stuff that sort of touches the intersection of those spaces. Yeah, that's kind of, I would say at a high level who I am.
That's really cool. Yeah, I'm excited to learn more about the design stuff and all the animation, because you look at some videos that have really great animation and you're like, I just know that took hours to do.
Oh, yes.
So cool. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Very niche.
As videographers and photographers, our animation knowledge is very limited. I mean, I did some like Blender and Cinema 4D in undergrad, but like very, very small bits.
Still pretty cool though.
Yeah, that is cool.
I didn't like it, to be honest.
It's a beast. Blender is a beast.
The one thing I remember was we made like a ball, and your job was like make this ball roll around a room. And like that's all I remember doing.
And then you ended up rolling around the room instead of the ball. Yeah.
Pretty much. All right. So can you talk about how we know each other?
Sure. Yeah. So at the beginning of my career, I actually only worked in video, right? I really focused on editing. I was, my official job title was production assistant. So I worked at a small agency, a lot of sort of second shooting stuff, a little bit of editing here and there. And so, I kind of got my start in that space, right? And so as my career progressed, and I sort of switched out of video a little bit, went more sort of into the animation, the design side of things. I very much still kind of kept video close. A lot of sort of small freelance gigs here and there. And a lot of my legacy clients, people that I'd worked with before, whether that was with the agency or just sort of people that I had met along the way, kept hitting me up. And so I kept doing the video work. And then I think at one point, I'd reached a project where it was either double booked or I just needed an extra set of hands. And at the time, I was working with someone that all three of us know, a mutual connection, who I think shared some of your work. And so I was like, well, that looks pretty good. I'm going to hit up Nick Jones, this Nick Jones guy, right? And it was awesome. I mean, you did an incredible job in the video. And I feel like from there, it's just sort of snowballed into this awesome relationship where we've done lots of different video projects together. Nick took my engagement photos or excuse me, my proposal photos. If you want to take my engagement photos, you can. And it just kind of went from there. So we go back a little bit, I would say.
Love that.
We've had a lot of fun on our shoots too.
Yeah. A lot of stuff's happened.
There's always something that happens.
Yeah, I think we're cursed. Or I'm cursed. No. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's weird because like we were talking on the mic. I pretty much don't even remember having a portfolio back then. Like that was fresh out of college for me.
Yeah.
I was fresh off a broken ankle. I had like 2 clients prior to that I can remember. So I'm thinking in my head, like, what did Anthony show you?
Anthony, let us know.
But I guess it worked out.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people can relate to that. You know what I mean? You never really feel prepared to jump into a field like this, and it's something where it's like, you say yes and then you kind of figure out how to do it, right? Or you just start doing it until you really kind of get the ropes down. You feel more comfortable and you kind of go from there.
100%.
But
you fake it till you make it.
Could have fooled me. I mean, I knew about the ankle, but didn't know any of the other stuff. And you did an amazing job.
I will say
amazing job.
That specific project was pretty easy in terms of like how it was laid out. Everyone involved, the talent and stuff, the people we were talking to, interviewing, was prepared, and the day, like the flow of the day was just so smooth that it was very hard for things to go wrong. So I credit that.
There you go.
That's how you want it
Yeah.
to go.
Yeah.
That's how you wish it goes every time,
Absolutely.
but it does not.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's how we learn, right?
Yep. That's why we all have funny stories.
Yes. Yes.
So there are kind of three kind of main pillars that I wanted to talk about today. One of which is your animation work. One is kind of narrative storytelling, and another is like client communication. All of which
one.
I know you are phenomenal at.
I appreciate that.
So to kind of start things off, as we said, we're not very informed about it, but can you just open our eyes and the audience's eyes about what it is the animation world is like in comparison to like maybe video or photography, how different it is?
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I think I'll start by just kind of like giving some context, because I think nowadays animation is very much a catch-all term. There's a lot that goes into that. So specifically what I work in is a field called motion graphics, which is it's basically the intersection of a lot of different disciplines. So it sort of lives in the middle of like video production, cinematography, design, music, all that kind of stuff. So if you were to Google it, I think the official definition is taking, animation principles, things like exaggeration, squash and stretch, smear, things like that, things that you see in Disney movies growing up, and applying it to graphic design in order to create animation, right? So it's a relatively new field, and it's something that I think is continuing to expand, but I personally really like it because for me, it gives me the flexibility, or the canvas, I should say, to dabble in a lot of different things, right? You need to understand implicitly timing. It's a huge important part of animation, but you also need to understand composition and cinematography, right? Things that you learn as a videographer. There's elements of art direction. There's elements of how does music influence something, pacing, storytelling, all these things together, right? So it's a really unique vehicle, I think, to really, express all those things and play with all those things. And you can do some really kind of interesting work with that, right? All the way from like what people commonly associate with motion design, which is explainer videos. I'm sure we've all seen them, right? Most websites have them as like a landing page thing, 60 seconds, here's what my business does, all the way to something that you were saying earlier, Kayla, like, embellishments over top live action footage, right? Like I think of like documentaries, right? Like title sequences or cool graphics, lower thirds, things like that.
Yeah,
So,
as a videographer, I think, it's like story blocks. We've all used little graphics like that.
Templates.
The
Yeah.
Mogerts.
Yes.
Sean's the one who would create them.
Yeah, which is
essentially.
crazy to me. That blows my mind.
Yeah. So it's a huge field. It's in a lot of ways it's similar, I think, to video production. I think folks that come from that background will find a lot of things that are familiar to them. But there's also some things that I think are a little bit different, right? So I think the biggest thing for, someone like myself is the pre-production phase, right? So, video, it takes a lot of effort to create something, right? Showing up on a shoot day and filming, there's a lot that goes into that. And then you sort of have everything you need to kind of make the video. With animation, you literally have to invent everything that you're seeing, right? And so when it's not as, I'm going to say simple, even though that's an oversimplification, it's not as simple as just showing up and shooting subjects or shooting an event or shooting a wedding, for example. You really have to think through all those kind of different elements. And so, in a freelance capacity, so working with other clients, it's really important that you're able to communicate that vision to them before anything's actually done. Because once you've created the video, it's very difficult to go back and make edits to it, right? The analogy I always use is it's like making a cake, right? Got to know what kind of cake you want, what kind of ingredients go into it, if there's any allergies, right? Because once you put it in the oven, there's no taking it back. You know what I mean?
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. Cheesy analogy.
Makes a
I
lot
think
of
it
sense.
communicates the point.
Yeah, for sure.
So in the work that I do, a lot of the success or failure you experience as a motion designer can be attributed to not necessarily like skill or experience, though obviously that plays a huge part in it. It's how well you're able to kind of communicate to the client, understand their need, and then architect something that fits that, right? And really, not only looks beautiful and is visually appealing, catches the eye, whatever the goal is, but also ties back to the business's need, right? Because it's an investment. So all those kinds of things. That's, I think in a nutshell, kind of my industry. There's so much more I could talk to, but I'll leave it there and then we can kind of go which direction you want to go from there.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
I never thought, like, obviously I knew how much work it was, like obviously a lot, but I never thought of it like that when you said you have to create everything.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Makes
Wow.
it difficult.
So, can you give an example of a project you recently did and like what you created?
Sure.
No, that's a tough one.
Yeah. So I think one of the most recent videos that I've done that I've like really enjoyed was a video for a cybersecurity business, right? And so typically when we think of cybersecurity, it's sort of clumped in with like B2B businesses, business to business, companies and whatnot. And there's always a stigma of B2B is boring, right? And it's because typically, when you're dealing with like boxes or cybersecurity or manufacturing, there's just inherently not a lot of creative aspects to that, right? So I always really like those projects because I get to think to myself, how do you make something that's inherently boring not boring, right? So this project I really enjoyed because I got to kind of come up with a metaphor for how you can represent cybersecurity, right? And so specifically what this platform does is it mimics what people call attack vectors look like, right? Which is essentially, outside threat actors, people that want to break in to your business or your, cybersecurity landscape, whatever that looks like. This program mimics that and kind of probes your internal system for vulnerabilities, right? So how do you kind of come up with an analogy that communicates that, right? So, after sitting in a lot of meetings and working with some other, cross-functional stakeholders who are also helping out on this project, the direction that we landed on is it's sort of like, if you don't have a software like this, there's sort of like a dark underside to your security, right? And so I liken that to a city, right? There's parts of the city that are bright, they're well lit, you feel safe there. And the sort of analogy there is when it's bright, it's well lit, it's secure, right? You know that it's protected. But there's also areas that are overlooked, darker, right? That you don't have a lot of visibility in. So the entire video sort of centered on this idea that, deep within the shadows, there's these threat actors that are dwelling that you don't know about. So we created this cool visual style where we're almost mimicking a city and you can see these sort of threat actors moving throughout, testing for vulnerabilities, and then ultimately in the video, finding and exploiting one. And we kind of have this really cool moment where that happens and everything sort of breaks down. And that's when you introduce the company as sort of the hero or saying, this is the solution that you need. So it was a really fun project to come up with, right? Like it's fun to kind of think through that B2B lens of like, how do I make something like this interesting? But then also I feel like the execution, we did a really good job at it, right? Like the end video is something that I definitely am super proud of and definitely delivered to the client. So I think that was probably one that recently I really enjoyed doing.
Oh, that's so cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I guess
Yeah.
I have kind of a two-part question. One is like, how involved are you personally in coming up with that idea in that collaborative process, like that, the cityscape thing? And then also you talked earlier about it's how essential it is to communicate the vision to them prior to starting.
Right.
What's your process on actually like showing them the pre-production and working through that?
Yes, that's a really good question. So two parts. So first part of the question, my involvement. So I've done everything on either side of the range. So everything from I'm just a cog in the wheel, I'm literally just doing the animation, all the way down to soup to nuts. This is me doing the entire project.
Oh, that's awesome.
So on this one, we were working with an agency, but really the only other input that we had was scripting, sound design, and obviously just like an executive producer that every once in a while would sort of give their thoughts on the project. So I was the one that sort of was handed that script, and then based on that came up with the concept, pitch it to our internal stakeholders, get the sign off, and then it gets to the point of, well, how do I communicate this to a client, right? And so I think for me, what's really, really important is it's one thing to hear the idea, but it's another thing to also see the idea, right? You almost need both sides of that equation to really sell someone on something. So typically, I'll write up an email that sort of walks through everything that I'm describing. But at the very start of my email, I'll always include a Loom video. And so for those that aren't familiar with Loom, it's a tool that you can use to record your screen and your webcam at the same time. It's really easy to use. And so what I'll do is when I'm pitching something like that, I'll come up with some like very rough storyboards, some very rough sketches that communicate that idea. And then I'll actually walk them through that on Loom, tell them about my idea, why I think it fits well with the problem that they're trying to solve, the point they're trying to communicate, and then show them sort of the correlation between that, how things in the story would progress, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think getting those multiple touch points, you have it in text, you have it in video, potentially you're looking and reading at both, really helps get down to the brass tacks of things. And so if they do have any issues with it, having multiple touch points and seeing it multiple times gives them the opportunity to sort of raise those concerns or say, no, this is well thought through and this is exactly what I need, which in this case, thankfully that was the case. They immediately were like, yep, this sounds good. So that's generally how I kind of go about approaching that.
I'm a visual learner, so I would appreciate the Loom recording.
Exactly.
I love that. That's
too.
a great idea,
Yeah.
especially for people who aren't like in our industry, who maybe don't have as like creative of an imagination for them to read it. It's probably harder for some other people to get to that level of like imagination.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's a great point.
Yeah,
I like that.
I totally agree. And sometimes too, I don't know. I feel like I actually think it's shorter to just like make a video and talk about it than to write an email, edit the email, condense it down, make sure it's not too long. I don't know. I feel like when someone starts a Loom video, they're going to watch it all the way through versus the email. If they see it's this long, they're going to be like,
yeah.
I guess, I just wasn't sure if storyboarding was possible with the animation stuff. Like, do you just hand draw stuff or is there a way to like quickly mock something up to do storyboards?
Sure. So not only is it possible, I would say it's an absolute necessity.
Okay.
Because you need a visual starting point before you go spend the time, even before you animate anything, designing high quality storyboards, style frames, right? Like that in and of itself takes a lot of time too, right? So generally, again, it depends on the client, how comfortable I am with them, how receptive they've been in the past to, different types of projects I've worked with. If it's a brand new client, if it's someone that I've worked with a lot, it's a very similar style to what they've expected. Generally, I'll do hand-drawn storyboards. I'm by no means good at drawing. Matter of fact, I'm horrible at it. But even very simple sketches that are thoughtful and supporting, text or, a voiceover like in a Loom video that explains what's going on the screen can go a long, long way towards selling that vision, right? In other cases where I really want something more polished, I won't exactly design things, but I'll use very clean vector shapes. I'll add a little bit more detail. Sometimes I'll pull together what's called a mood board. So other work other people have done that I think is in the same vein as this to kind of give those folks an idea of generally like the direction I'm going for. And then of course, really walking through the story, right? Sketching or designing all those different frames to ensure that all the key moments in that story are communicated, right? And captured so that they can see very quickly at a high level how the entire narrative will look before you even pick up Illustrator or Photoshop or After Effects, any of those kind of tools.
Interesting. Yeah.
That's crazy.
I guess I do mostly mood boards. I don't necessarily need to lay out story piece by piece. I just use for video screenshots of like stock footage or something just to I mean, you and I have done it for some of our projects, like just 100%. Stuff like that. That's my version of like mood boards and stuff. And that's why I was curious about like how that could translate to the animation side of things.
Definitely.
But that's interesting.
Yeah. I just think, broadly, anytime you're telling a story like this, you need some sort of like pre-production visualization, whether it's as simple as just showing reference work or if it's as in-depth as something that you would use for like a full animated video. Like it's just a great way to get client buy-in and ensure that everyone's on the same page.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which prevents revisions, costly revisions, the endless feedback train. We all love getting on the feedback train.
Oh,
right?
yeah. I imagine there are some long contracts that go along with this.
Yes.
Or at least a contract.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
So much work.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But I love it. It's fun.
That's cool. It sounds fun.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
It must take a long time.
Yeah, I would say for like a 60-second video, you're talking probably at minimum 3 weeks. Okay. Something a little bit longer. Like for example, I did a 120-second video, and that's about an 8-week timeline.
Okay, that's not bad though.
Not horrible.
That seems pretty long to me.
Yeah,
that
not
seems
horrible.
really reasonable.
Yeah,
actually.
Yeah, and there's obviously a lot of caveats. If you're doing a style that's really involved, unless you're bringing in more resources, that's going to push the timeline out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Like
if you're
that.
juggling multiple projects, you need to build in extra time.
Oh, yeah.
All that kind of stuff. So
The cybersecurity one sounded pretty in depth.
yeah. It was a little bit of a doozy, but
So
happy
cool.
with how it came out.
Yeah.
That's all
That's
that matters.
great.
How often do you need to like outsource help, or do you do most of it yourself? Like for us, I'm hardly ever on a shoot by myself, as
Right.
you know. Like I always have at least someone helping me the day of, maybe help with the ending side of things. But for you, how often do you need to outsource for help?
It's a good question. I think it comes down to two things for me. So there's the availability side of things, and I think there's the quality side of things. So generally, if I have a lot of projects going on, but for whatever reason, I want to continue taking this on, whether it's like a long time tenured client, or if it's just something, a client that has a really interesting business and I would potentially like to keep the door open. I'll try to bring in either other animators, other designers, folks to kind of help out that process a little bit.
I assume you have kind of like your go-to.
I have a
few.
Rolodex. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a lot of really reliable folks. And sometimes people reach out to me for the same thing, right? Like I think just like in videography, it's always good to have people that you can tap on, when you need to scale up a project or you're in a pinch.
It's hard to find.
It is. Yeah. Especially people that are quality, reliable, are
Fun to
there
work
for you.
with.
Fun to work with. They get the
Check all the
space,
boxes,
all that kind of
yeah.
stuff. Yeah. But generally I would say most projects, unless I'm being brought in by an outside entity, it's just me, just kind of me doing that, which again is what I like about it, right? Doing the design, doing the animation, the sound design, the music choice, thinking through the concepts. That's what drew me to the field, I think, to begin with. So, if at all possible, I like to kind of keep it in my wheelhouse. But obviously it just depends on the project.
Yeah.
Do you ever, I think I was talking to your fiance about this once actually.
Oh boy.
Do you ever get bored? Because you're at your computer all the time. And unlike us, like having to physically go out for production, all of your work is at your computer. So
gonna
you're
ask that
sitting at
too.
your desk all day, every day.
Yeah.
And she was telling me like, he like never gets up out of that chair.
I go through phases, I would say. Like when there's a project I'm really excited about, time just flies by, right? Like I'll wake up, I'll have my bagel, I'll take my shower, and then it's work. And then all of a sudden, boom, my fiance's home. I'm like, oh wow, it's like 6 p.m., right? Other days when either I'm doing something that maybe is a little bit more dry, or it's something I've done a lot of, or I'm even just between work, like it can get a little bit lonely. You know what I mean? Like it's not exactly like an office environment where you have your coworkers, there's people you can, just kind of idly chit chat, water cooler talk, right? Not a lot of that exists for me.
Yeah.
Especially coming from an office. I started, working in a 9-to-5 space before going freelance and working for myself. So there's definitely an adjustment period there. And I think you really have to be proactive about kind of keeping yourself engaged, hitting up other creators or even non-creators, just friends, making time for yourself, going out for walks, things like
walks,
that.
my favorite part of my day.
Seriously, I think there's no creative rut a good walk can't fix.
Yeah,
that is a hill I
seriously.
will die on.
Me too.
Yeah, that is a hill I will die
100%.
on.
I make sure I get at least 2 every single day. If I have a whole day where I'm sitting in my office, I have to get up.
Yeah,
Have to.
got to hit that step goal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
10K steps. And you can't like really go to a coffee shop or go somewhere else and work. Like you need your Mac Daddy computer to get this shit done, right?
Yeah,
That seems like needs a lot of bandwidth.
Yeah. I would say I probably could if I really wanted to. Once I'm actually doing like the animation work, totally, because MacBook Pros, they are battery hungry, especially After Effects. Like that just eats up your battery quickly. If you're doing more conceptual stuff, I actually think it's nice to, take a walk.
Okay.
Or even just like, don't sit at your desk. Go
Right.
sit on your couch.
Just sit on the
Go
couch,
Yes,
walk
anywhere.
around anywhere, right? That's kind of what I would say for that.
Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, I definitely understand the loneliness aspect. Probably not to that extent, just because we go out and like work with people
Right.
probably a little more than you do.
Yeah.
But it's definitely lonely for sure.
100%. Yeah. Something that's helped me a lot recently. So I'm on Slack. And for those of you that don't know what Slack is, it's basically like, imagine text messaging, but purpose built for businesses.
Yeah,
so
you're all about
I'm
Slack.
a big Slack guy. Big Slack guy.
Big Slacker.
Yeah, so it's big Slacker. There you go. Yeah. So like if you've heard of Discord, it's similar to that. It's not too dissimilar from like Facebook Messenger.
Yeah.
But you can join a lot of communities on there of either like-minded creators, or you can directly add your friends, much like you would text someone just by having their number, which is nice because, you know, in between projects or just when you need some inspiration or you just need someone to talk to, you just hit them up, say, hey, you know, what's going on? Let's get a coffee chat. You know, let's just catch up, you know, shoot the breeze a little, see what you're up to. That helps a lot, you know,
Cool.
Hear what other people are doing, you know, share some funny stories, some horror stories, you know, get some common empathy going. It's all good. All good.
Cool.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you and I, last time we saw each other was doing just that.
Yeah.
Like we were both having some crazy business stuff going on. We just needed to just have a therapy session, basically.
Yeah. Some
Yeah.
business therapy.
Got
Yeah.
some lunch and just talked it out.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, that is so needed.
Yeah. Especially right now too. It's a very unique time, I feel like, to be creators like we are.
Yeah.
The economy's not bad, but it's not good. You know what I mean? And I certainly think compared to like 4 or 5 years ago, it's a lot harder to find paying clients, you know, which adds an extra layer of stress and fatigue that's constantly on our shoulders, right? As business owners. So I think all the more reason why it's so important to have an outlet, be it walking, be it, you know, meeting out for lunch, be it like, you know, playing video games for an hour, whatever that is. Like it's important. It's really important.
Balance.
Exactly.
Definitely.
It's the spice of life.
All right. I guess if we can move on kind of to the second pillar for today, like I forgot what I was about to say, the narrative storytelling, because I kind of wanted to tie in what you and I have done with the higher ed stuff. That was my main thought process when I came up with this kind of bullet point.
Sure.
Like ever since you and I have worked together, we've done a lot of like narrative work. We interview someone, we film B-roll, put it together, that's the video. And you have always been the one to put all the audio bits together to form that story in the editing process. And every single time you crush it to a level that I know I couldn't do.
Thank you.
So you were just phenomenal at somehow putting this story together. Even if you've never met these people, you hear them out and you just are able to put it together at a level I just can't. So that's kind of how we've grown into our little editing process. You would always take on the narrative portion, hand it off to me, where I input all the B-roll, and it turned into a pretty solid, smooth process for us. So I wanted to hear how, I guess, if you even know, you learned to be so good at that.
Yeah. That's a good question. It's interesting because it's not like earlier on in my career, it's not something that I ever thought I was really good at. It wasn't until I think other people started reacting to my videos that I was like, oh, maybe this is something that I'm good at. I think it starts just intrinsically from having a love for stories, right? Like I love documentaries. I love watching TV shows, you know, all that kind of stuff. And so at a very base level, you know, I feel like I'm a little bit more like in tune with that than maybe your average, you know, person might be.
Sure.
So I think number one, there's a base level of that. I think number two, in college, I was a marketing major, right? Which is all about selling, right? It's all about how you get people to buy into your product or how you overcome cognitive barriers, put stories together in a way that people can empathize with and understand and want to be a part of. In addition to that, I was also an English minor. So those two things complement very well, right? Written communication with the psychological aspect of how you market to people.
Yep.
So for me, it's a little bit easier to see, I think, a story through that lens versus like sort of start to finish, you know, I just want to make something that's sappy. Whereas when I look at it, I'm like, here's the pieces we would need to tell the story. Here's the end goal. Let's work backwards from there and figure out all the sort of key components. I would be remiss to not mention I had a fantastic mentor growing up at my first job, growing up as an editor at my first job.
Yeah.
His name was Jesse. He is to this day, I think, one of the best visual and narrative editors that I know. You know him as well. And he's a fantastic creative. And so at the time at this agency, we were doing a lot of sort of work either in the higher ed space, a lot of sort of like your classic business talking head pieces. And so being able to work with someone that really had an intimate understanding of what good editing was, I think gave me a little bit of like a fast pass into that life and what that was like, and certainly gave me some good opportunities to fail, right? Because I didn't just start editing like this, right? Like there's a lot that goes into it that, ends up being crap, right? Or just isn't good for this reason or that reason. So putting all that together, that definitely helped out a lot. And then, obviously having gone to college and having, been a little bit involved too in UNH where I went to schools, like CPA, which is their communication and something. Basically, it's their like creative and social arm of the university. I had a little bit of insider knowledge. So if you put all that together, I think it's the perfect storm for like good editing, right? Just understanding what these people need to sell to students, and then having a little bit of like historical knowledge of like generally what sells well for prospective students looking to enroll at a university or something like that. And then the other piece of it, there's a lot of pieces to this, if you couldn't tell. I feel like we're on like piece 7 right now. But they all contribute, right, in one way or the other. The other thing that I think really plays into editing, which anyone can just pick up and start doing, is pre-production, right? Before you even show up to film an interview, thinking through those questions specifically to get the story that you want. And you should know what kind of story you want because you've talked to your client, you've really vetted their need, and you really have a good understanding of what this video or this whatever you're making needs to do. And so then once you have good questions and you show up and you get, to meet the person that you'll be interviewing, you can, even before the camera rolls, much like what we did, just start talking to them, getting a sense of who they are, right? Build a little bit of rapport. And then when the record button goes on and they're under the lights, it'll be that much easier for them to feel more comfortable and get that sound bite, right? And then it's also active listening as you're interviewing them, ensuring that you're getting the sound bites that you want. So when you go into the edit, you have everything you need, right? And it's just a matter of sort of Tetrising it all together and connecting story threads and ensuring that, the narrative is cohesive, it flows well. I'm also a big fan of doing like different chapters, right? So like a quick intro at the beginning and then like, two main parts with a little bit of an interlude to break it up. Things like that, right? That you kind of pick up through the years of doing projects like that. I think have ultimately led me to being good at that, but it's weird. I don't have like a one good answer for like how you could be like a good like story editor. I think it's a combination of a lot of things.
Yeah. Experience too. Yeah. The interviewing part was huge. I can't count how many times I've been interviewing people and they don't give you the answer they want the first time you ask the question. So you sneak it in at the end and just ask it a different way.
Yeah.
And then it's like, ooh, that's the sound.
There's been so many times like, so I guess for context, Sean and I used to work a lot with the University of New Hampshire to what was the department thing that we were talking about? Like what'd you call that?
Yeah. So it was the College of Life Science and Agriculture used to hire us a lot to make like, we basically would create like narrative edits about a lot of the research work that students were doing or other things that are sort of benefiting New England as a whole. To
create their like digital magazine.
Yeah, these are stories from a magazine, correct. Yeah.
So in doing that, there were so many times in the moment of like you would always be the one interviewing. We'd always have our liaison with us, but like a lot of the times you would be asking questions. And there were so many times I'm sitting there like listening to you and hearing them say a response, and it was a good enough response that it probably could work, but I just knew in your head that you almost had a predestined thought of like you want them to say, not to put words in their mouth, but like it would sound a lot better if they said it something along these lines, and they are capable of saying it, and that's what they truly believe, and you're very good at just making them say it in the way that both you want and a way that they too believe in. And
like framing it correctly.
Because you'll have them repeat it a couple times and they'll say it at a different time each one, and you'll get the one you want every single time.
Definitely. And I can't underscore that enough, right? It's like I'm not putting words in their mouth.
No, never.
It's disingenuous to the video, and I think people pick up on that. Like people have a high level of like BS detection, I would call it. But you can be a little bit honest, like, just like if I were to speak to you as you're somebody interviewing, like, if you're talking a lot about how your hometown was important to you, right? Like that's something where I can be like, clearly that's something that's important to you. For the video, like this is how I see that coming together. Let's reframe this question to put that at the front, right?
Yeah.
As like the main reason why you're excited versus like if you opened up and you were like, oh, this, and this. Oh, but actually, halfway through you kind of realize it's this that I like, right? Just reframe that, put that at the front. Let's use that as like that powerful, strong statement in the beginning. Things like that, I think can go a long way towards helping create a narrative that is really cohesive and sort of like on point for whatever problem or, story you're trying to tell.
Yeah. I feel like my journalism background has helped me a lot with that.
Oh, sure.
With interviewing people. We interview people all the time. And like the journey from my freshman year to who I am now, like college really pried me out of my shell. I was super shy. And being a journalism major and having that experience really forced me to just like, and it's a lot of just realizing that it's a person on the other side. You don't have to be nervous. You don't have to be like, you don't have to be nervous. They're a person. You're just asking them a question and like you're just having a conversation.
100%. Yeah. Which is why I think we were talking about this earlier. I think journalism is a great major for someone that's looking to get into video, especially narrative video, because that's literally what you do anyway.
Yeah.
You're just sort of translating the medium, I think, from paper to video.
Yes.
But you sort of have that skill set built in already. Yeah, definitely.
I know you guys had that. I'm like, all my knowledge was just trial by fire.
Which is okay too.
There's no one right path, like we all get there. It's just, some people have head starts because of one thing or the other, but the destination is the same.
I mean, everything I know pretty much from like the narrative side of things, I would argue I learned from you. Like,
oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
The way we structured it, that you would send me like the narrative cut and I would fill the B-roll in, receiving those and like before I even start, I would pretty much analyze what you did to get a better sense of like, okay, how are you doing this? Because I'm always trying to learn from you. So I would look and see all these gaps that you made. You already pre-designated where the interludes are going to go for me to like put the music, put the B-roll in. So like seeing that, it was like a template. So I could almost match that for all my future narrative videos.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I'm a big fan of interludes.
You are.
You got to give
Can we talk about the interlude again?
We'll talk about interludes. So just so everyone knows what an interlude is. So if you're watching like an interview, right, and someone's going on and on about a point, it's good to have like a 5 to 10, or it could even be longer, second break where there's no talking, there's no anything. It's just B-roll. You can duck the audio or the music so it gets a little bit louder.
Yeah.
And for me, what I really like about that is it lets the audience sit with the information, digest it, but also it refocuses them, right? Instead of having them so hyper-focused on every little line or this or that, give them the second to just reset. They can look at the visuals a little bit and then prepare for that next point, right?
Yeah.
So I almost kind of think of it as like a chapter in a story, right? So like you have your intro bit, kind of gives at a high level what the video is going to be about, maybe a couple interesting lines here that hook people in, nice 10-second break, let that sink in, and then you begin the next part, good minute chunk of more narrative things that pushes the story farther, right? And develops stakes or does whatever, you're looking to do. And then another small interlude that, then lets that settle and then you get into the next part and so on. And so
from an editing standpoint, it also helps with pacing.
Yes.
Because you don't want just like every single second there are words being said.
Yeah.
You need a break.
I like that. I've done interludes. I like that word for it. Yeah, it's like perfect. In between, like if there's multiple people speaking.
Yeah.
So I've done that in between multiple people, but I really like the in between, just like a couple of different points.
There's a
for
lot
one
more
person.
use cases.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's nice.
Yeah.
I like that. It's a great
And even
idea.
like in the the early post production when we're still communicating with the client, you'll even put in a little text graphic of like interlude. So when they watch the narrative cut, they know that stuff is gonna go here. It's not just a black screen.
That's so funny.
Yeah, it is funny.
I love an interlude.
Honestly, I think like a very easy formula that really anyone can pick up to start like working on this a little bit is just think of it like a high school essay. You have your introduction.
That's so true.
Your thesis, right? A very short thesis about what the video is about, something catchy at the front, paragraph break, interlude. First paragraph presents your argument or builds up the context a little, sets that up. Interlude, second paragraph that either furthers that first paragraph, presents a new point, something like that, or changes the tone, right? If we're going from happy to sad, if there's a conflict or a resolution, something like that. And then at the end, I don't generally do like a conclusion per se, but I'll have like one or two really strong points that I think really encapsulate the story well. And you always want to end on that strong note, right?
Yeah.
So just using that very basic, I think like outline can take someone with just like very average editing skills and just level them up a little bit, right? Just thinking about it in that framework can really help tell a story better, you know?
Yeah.
And I
Absolutely.
think through that too, you also learn how to connect other people's points and chop things up and rearrange order to better serve that, right? And then, you know, that's when you're on your path there to learning more. But yeah.
Yeah, there's been a few interviews that sometimes you're just never going to get what you want. And
Happens.
people get
True.
very, very nervous. And as much as I tell people like, hey, I can chop this up, I'm going to make you look good, I promise. Like, people still get nervous in front of a camera, which is very understandable. And there have been so many times when I have taken a very choppy, very not great interview and made it look halfway decent.
Yeah.
Which I think is like, that's a skill right there.
absolutely
I'll
a
to
skill.
the point where I
Yeah.
send it to the client and they're like, oh my God, you're a magician.
Yeah. Magic. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fun too.
Yeah.
And I mean, being on camera is not easy. I say that all the time.
Yeah. I think it's important to have empathy for them. You know what I mean? It's a
100%,
hard
yeah.
thing to do.
It is.
And you clearly have seen it. I know you've seen it through, you know, the work we do. You always feel so bad for people that just like really just don't feel comfortable. And rightfully so. You have lights, cameras, you know, microphones, all this kind of stuff around you.
Yeah.
And it can be hard, right? Your mind's racing on all this kind of stuff, ensuring you're saying the right things. So to your point, I think that's why it's so important to just like make them feel comfortable.
Yes.
Really like establish that rapport before.
Yes.
And do anything you can to just give them a little bit of like a sense of calm when they're in the hot seat.
Yeah.
You know
Be
what
a
I mean?
coach.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
talked about that before. Yeah.
I got to say, Nick's the reason why I love working with Nick is because his attention to detail when it comes to art direction is phenomenal. Anytime we walk into an empty classroom, Nick has an idea of how to make it look good. It could be stealing a plant from the biology department, which we've done. It could be, you know, just putting random books and stuff in the background and make the space feel like lived in and organized. He's your guy for that.
I love that.
Oh, I appreciate that. I think, I don't know. I do
Cue
love
the plant in the background. By the way, yeah.
I'll give Kayla credit for that one today.
You definitely did that first, though.
Maybe.
When we were designing this set first.
It's like, I like interior design. I will never call myself an interior designer by any means.
Probably could.
But I appreciate interior design. So like I follow a bunch of random interior design accounts or even going on Pinterest just for fun to like just look. Like I do that.
he's not decorating his room. He's just
Literally,
looking.
I just do that for fun. So it's like all that I can use on set as like inspiration. If I see, oh, there are some things here. If I stack them a certain way, I can make it look a lot better. You know, don't always just have books vertical. Lay books down and pile them up.
I like this.
Small tricks like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you can styling a shelf. Sounds so lame, but I find so fun.
That's your specialty. That's your niche.
Yeah, your whole brand is just, it's very aesthetic. And it shows like in
thank you.
your personal life too, I think.
Thank you. I try. Okay, I was actually, that reminds me of what I was going to say actually. I was going to say that back to when we were like doing our ending stuff, it was in the same vein actually. Something I appreciate about you is that you always call it how it is. And when I will send over my versions of the B-roll stuff, you will give me all the revisions and like not in a mean way ever, but like everything that needs to be changed, you will say, and like very constructive criticism, always helping me improve the edit in some way. Obviously, it's never going to be perfect, draft one. So I always expect a bunch of revisions, and I'm not mad about it at all. It's like, yeah, like everything Sean says will make this video better.
I appreciate that.
Oh
Thank
my
you.
God, you guys are just like gassing each other up. I love this.
Yeah, I
This
know.
is great. This is why we all hang out, because we need to like just tell each other that we're doing great work.
We're bringing Kayla on set next time, so that way we can find some things to guess her over. But I know they're there. We just, as soon as we work more together,
I'm a hype girl
Yeah,
too.
like when we stole a plant from the biolab, we had to like, it wasn't like a wheelbarrow, but we had to like
It was like a rolly chair.
Yeah, some big rolly thing. We had to wheel it down.
What if it was like an experimental plant?
Wasn't the guy in there?
Yeah, I
Oh,
think
okay.
like there was a
I
bunch
think
of
he came in like halfway between us, like rolling the plant out, and I was like, I kind of was like, we're just doing a shoot. Like, we'll bring it right back. He's like, whatever. And I was like, all right, yeah, cool. Yeah.
It's like, I don't get paid enough for this.
I mean, yeah, because a lot
Plant
of
snatchers.
times we're in like a conference room, so there's nothing. It's
Yeah.
just a big ass
Yeah.
table, some chairs, and then like an ugly TV on the wall. We gotta
Yeah.
hide
That's
the
really
ugliness.
brutal. That's
had
brutal.
some weird situations like on our UNH shoots. I feel like, and a lot of it's just the subject matter. You know, I feel like we're in the forest filming bugs, or we're on the beach in the winter, you know, filming.
Yeah, no,
sand dunes.
we're not always in rooms.
Yeah.
Like, there have been many times we were out in the field
Yeah,
That's cool. Though.
and like setting up boom mics and stuff.
Yeah.
Lights in the field.
Yeah.
So like,
Nick holding up diffusion for an hour straight, you know, in the blistering
it's
New England
hard.
winter.
Like,
Yeah,
it
is hard.
sucks.
yeah,
Yep. It's not always pretty.
yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, it's always been fun, and hopefully we can keep doing some higher ed stuff because you've done a little bit of higher ed, right?
Yeah, Roger Williams hired me to capture their alumni weekend
Oh,
this
awesome.
year, which was so fun.
So that probably
Yeah.
felt special too, because you went to
So
college. And
special. And it was my 5-year reunion.
Oh, there we
that.
go.
Crazy.
Yeah. So you're getting the double whammy on that.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I dragged a couple of my friends and my boyfriend with me, so we like also made a weekend out of it.
Were they unpaid actors?
Unpaid actors. Oh yeah, unpaid. I mean, I provided snacks and some booze, so that helped.
I think they're paid. Then.
Incentivized.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I get paid in booze and snacks.
There
That
you
sounds
go.
Great. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
But it was really fun, and like the whole thing was, you know, in past years they haven't had content to promote the alumni weekend that really incentivized people to come. So like my job was to make it look fun, and I definitely accomplished that.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, it was great.
I think higher ed is a great place to be as a videographer. I know we talk about this a lot, but I feel like there's a lot of room for creativity, but it's also very structured in the sense
Yes.
that, you know, we all know what college is. We all know what makes a college appealing, right? At least we are all young enough to empathize with
Yes.
students, and, you know,
Exactly.
they understand that. I think it's a really, really, really solid industry to get into if you can.
Yeah,
I think our
that's
age
why.
actually helps with what we were saying earlier about the interview and stuff, like making them
definitely.
feel comfortable.
Oh god,
Yeah.
yeah.
They feel as a lot
We're
more comfortable
relatable.
with us
100%.
talking to
We're
them,
relatable as fuck.
like a 45-year-old woman.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
exactly, like you don't want some like middle-aged person like asking you about these like intensely personal reasons why you came to school. You
Right.
want someone
Yeah.
that can understand and empathize
Someone who
with that.
gets it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I still feel like I'm fresh out. Like it doesn't feel like it's been 5 years.
Isn't that
When did you graduate?
2018.
Okay, so a year before me.
Yeah. It feels the same way though. Like it still feels like yesterday.
See,
Yeah.
that's so weird. Like, you're both out of college longer than I am, but for me, it feels like it was forever ago.
Really?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel
been
like
through a
people
lot.
people have different like experiences, and I think that informs how fondly you remember college or not.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah. I miss
Yeah.
it.
yeah.
Best 4 years. So fun.
Did you feel like when you started working with UNH, did you feel kind of like nostalgic, like Kayla was for her 5-year and like reunion thing?
So I actually started working with them while I was still at UNH. That's kind of like when
Oh.
I got my first sort of like video camera and got into like production. And it was like very simple stuff. Very simple. Actually, one of the first videos I produced was with Alex, who you've had on the show.
Oh my God.
I didn't know who he was. He didn't know who I was. He hadn't even picked up a camera. He was an engineer, right?
Yeah.
And we like filmed a
yeah.
video about it.
That's crazy.
And that's why it's kind of crazy to like see it now, but that's an aside. Most people won't get that, but like very like simple, basic stuff. And then over time, as the folks that I was working with matured in their role and the needs of the college matured, and I grew as a videographer, it just kept going, right? And to the point where we were producing like really polished pieces that got us to work with like other parts of UNH, right? So we expanded from just, the few people we were working with. We were working with the Manchester team. We were working with the marketing wing for at one point to do some like recap work, stuff like that. So, it also highlights, I feel like, the power of networking. You know what I mean? Like if you do a good job and people understand that and they're all, in cahoots, your name will get out there.
Yep.
well.
And nurturing relationsents too.
Yeah,
For
absolutely.
sure.
Okay, well, speaking of networking,
Wasn't that a good segue, Nick?
Segue.
Yeah.
We love segue.
it's my active listening here.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just, you gave me the opening. I'm gonna take
I love it.
You have always been high on LinkedIn, and like you have been the main
Big
person to
LinkedIn guy.
convince me to
Yeah.
start, and like Slack too. So like probably the last 6 to 8 months, I've really gotten on LinkedIn, and I was so like anti LinkedIn up until then. I was like, I want nothing to do with that. Like,
Yeah.
it looks horrible.
Yeah.
But now I'm on LinkedIn more than Instagram.
Yeah. It's it's interesting, right? Like LinkedIn has a stigma, and there's no doubt about that. And I think like I was listening to the episode you guys did last week, and you were talking a lot about sales, right? And like, you never want to come off as like salesy. And I think sometimes, people that work in sales, there's a certain je ne sais quoi about it that just doesn't make you, it's almost off-putting, right? I do think that most people need to at least give the platform a try and think about sales in ways different than traditionally how we're taught, right? Car sales is a perfect example, right? Everyone knows and hates that, right? But with LinkedIn, for me, sales is less about pitching people and it's more about relationship management and just getting your name out there. And then over time, seeing where that ends up, right? So whether it's connecting with fellow creators who maybe do, a similar style of work or work with a similar client and just hitting them up and say, hey man, like, I really like your work. There's a lot of things that I think, you do really well. Would love to pick your brain. I'm also in that space, right? Then you build out these relationships over time, hearkening back to what you were saying earlier, adds to your Rolodex of people you can count on. But also some of the work that I get as a freelancer comes from other freelancers, right? And I'm sure you guys have the same experience, right? Like sometimes people who are at capacity will just pass it off to their, another freelance friend they have. So in that way, it's also really good. But it's also just good to be familiar with people, in general at different companies, right? You're selling to a person, you're not selling to an individual company, right? So being able to connect with these people, I think you actually mentioned this last episode about Instagram, right? Like interacting with people's posts and doing things like that, just building a little bit of a personal brand, getting them familiar. So that way, when something does come across their plate, you'll be in a much better position to pitch. That's that literally is how I got a few of the retainer clients that I used to work with quite frequently, right? Just interacting with people. It was another like video creator, just kind of seeing the stuff that he was doing. His company was doing a lot of interesting work. So it was good to follow him every once in a while, drop a comment, and then one day he literally was asking for motion designers and I was like throwing my hat in the ring. And because we had known each other a little bit and had, talked a little bit, it was so much easier for him to take the leap on me versus, Joe Schmo that he's never met before. Right?
Yeah.
And so I think in that way, LinkedIn is a really good way to maintain those relationships. Now, granted, not every business that you want to work with is going to be on LinkedIn, right? Especially for like more consumer brands. They're on LinkedIn, but Instagram might be a better place to solicit that. I work with a lot of businesses directly, so LinkedIn is the place for me to be.
Right.
How active are you on LinkedIn, Caleb? Because I know Nick now he's a convert.
I'm terrible. I literally actually checked yesterday. I had a couple of messages from people that it's from people who are asking. They found my email eventually and they like emailed me, and then I looked back and they had LinkedIn messaged me first. I was like, fuck. So I know I need to be better about it, and it's one of the things that I am working on.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. I think I know we talked about this, but I think the best thing you can start doing on LinkedIn is just like posting the stuff that you're doing, or like posting a little bit of thought leadership here and there.
Thought leadership. Yeah.
Yeah. Not
Thought
stuff
leadership.
That's like,
what do you mean by thought leadership?
So basically content that other folks may not be aware of. So like a great example is like you're Caleb, the business owner, right? Or you're Nick,
I actually just posted something about sound design. And I think that was a pretty good example.
Okay.
Yeah. So you as a business,
because I don't go on it. I'll look later.
Yeah, we're going to work on that. Yeah. But like you as the business owner, maybe that video is something that you want to be doing, but you don't know anything about it. And you probably don't know what sound design is, right? So just having, running across a post like Nick's where it's like, hey, sound design is something that really helps elevate a video. And then I'm sure you included an example or something like that. That paints Nick as a thought leader in his space, right? It gives a lot of credentials to him as a creator.
Okay.
And so if done thoughtfully and correctly over time, naturally that's going to increase your reputation as you connect with more people, right? A lot of the most successful people that I follow who are also freelancers do kind of what we do on LinkedIn, do that very well. They create content that has real value for the people they're trying to sell to, that they, are passively creating and every once in a while popping up there, that helps sort of establish them as that authoritative figure.
Yeah. I like
Personal
that.
branding.
That's kind of what I try to do when I post some tips on Instagram. Just like it's mostly social media tips and tips about video and why you should do video and all this good stuff. And I've had a couple people message me and be like, "Oh my God, I know I've been thinking about doing this. I know I need to do this." And so I'm in the back.
Ladies and gentlemen, she's a thought leader.
Yeah. So I do it on Instagram, and I could easily post the videos that I post on Instagram on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
It's just
I
an
know.
extra step.
I know.
And TikTok, and then Facebook.
Well,
you know.
TikTok's a whole other.
It's a whole other.
I don't understand TikTok.
I don't either.
Although through LinkedIn, I'm starting to, because there's people that specialize on a TikTok platform on LinkedIn. There's this guy, I think his name is Travis Tyler, that I follow, who works for a company called Motion. They do analytics for social media platforms. And, you know, at first glance, you'd be like, well, why would you want to be connected with someone like that? You know, the reason why is because he posts super insightful videos about trends on TikTok for like UGC, user generated content, and why they're super effective. Like he had a great video today talking about, there's like a trend going on where like there's a crazy video of like someone like falling out of a chair, and then you start the video by falling out of a chair. Like you've seen that.
It's so good.
Yeah, it's great, right? He did a whole breakdown on the psychology of why that works well, and he showed it with actual data to support why that's a great way for viewer retention, right? Why it holds people's attention. So as someone that, you know, really doesn't know much about TikTok, just from that guy alone, I've learned a lot. And if I was in a position where I needed to pay for something, knowing that he's putting out content like that, I'd be more likely to, you know, engage with him and his company because of it.
Yeah.
So just another great example of why, you know, personal branding or just being on LinkedIn in general, I think is so helpful.
Yeah.
Because I learn all these things all the time, and you can network with people, and it's very accessible.
I follow Adam Mosseri on Instagram, the CEO of Instagram or owner or whatever his title is.
I don't know.
And he posts tips about the algorithm and like updates.
Yeah.
And so it's similar where I'm like taking this in, and then sometimes I'll share it to my story and be like, hey, this is what he's saying about
100%.
the algorithm.
Yeah.
This fucking algorithm on Instagram that we all love so much.
Yeah. And then inevitably when you get into the room and someone asks you about something to do with Instagram, you know, you have a little bit more knowledge now to be like, well, did you know? Right.
Yep. And these platforms are always changing. So following people like that is important.
Yeah, 100%. I could not agree more.
Yeah.
Be on LinkedIn.
I mean, yeah.
This is not a paid or not a sponsored post.
Not a sponsored post.
Yeah.
I've used LinkedIn more so for connecting with fellow creatives. Like we've already had a guest on the podcast from last month of one of my recent LinkedIn connections. So I've already found a lot of value in it just from like talking to these people, pulling inspiration, and hopefully one day soon to like meet up and actually do something together.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a
that's
whole
awesome.
blue ocean of opportunity.
That's how I found my friend Aiden. I think I've talked about that before. Followed him on social media.
God bless social media.
Powerful.
Honestly, it is. Yeah.
Here we go.
I have a hot take, actually.
right,
it's
let's
more
hear it.
directed at you.
Oh, it's directed at me.
Yes.
All right. Am I going to agree or disagree with this?
I don't know. I'm going to ask you something.
All right.
So we recently did a shoot for UNH for a Hulu ad, correct? That's what it was called?
Yeah.
So, you know, like on Hulu, if you don't pay for the full thing, you get these ads. And currently, when I'm watching Hulu, I'm getting a 30-second ad for the University of Rhode Island, which is the school I used to go to. And it's a 30-second video, and it is exactly what Sean and I did for the University of New Hampshire, but for the University of Rhode Island.
Really?
Ooh.
That's the tea.
But what I
Who
was
did
gonna
it better?
This is what I was going to say. I think theirs blew ours out of the water.
What? Now
Like,
I need to see this.
Dude, theirs was so good. And I'm like, damn, that's what ours was
No.
supposed to be.
False. I doubt it.
So I was going to ask you, like, what... That was the first time I personally have done, like, a Hulu ad. I forget if you did one before, but I want to see how you thought that project as a whole went.
Sure. So lots to break
Just
down
shitting
there.
on
Yeah, lots to
yourself.
break down there.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, when I was watching, I was like, damn, like, this
Yeah.
was so good.
So there's, I think, a couple things that are important to consider when doing a comparison like this. So number one, I think there's always something to be said about, like in this instance where like one ad copies another, someone always has to take the creative risk first, right? And so someone has to come up with the idea. It's easier to see an existing idea and improve upon it
For sure.
versus architecting a new idea and testing it,
Yes.
right? So they were the beneficiaries of, you know, us and other people that have maybe done similar ads coming before them and trying things out. Right?
Absolutely.
So that's number one. Number two, there's budget consideration, right? At the end of the day, because I know we know the budget, and I'm sure, you know, Rhode Island, whatever it was, URI had a much bigger budget than we did,
that's
right?
a big school.
So that ultimately comes down to production value. It comes down to what you can rent, what you can shoot with, how many people can be there, if you can hire paid actors, if you can get, dedicated spaces to shooting, all that kind of stuff. The third thing to consider is timeline. We were on a tight timeline.
We shot ours in one day.
Yeah, we shot everything in one day. And I think soup to nuts, it was like a 3-week or maybe 4-week production process from like cold outreach to final deliverables. And we had a ton of recuts, like different, 1x1, 9x16, 16x9.
15-second cut,
30.
cut.
I think we even had like a 6-second cut.
Yeah.
Jeez, what?
So
Vine days.
there's a lot of things to consider there, right? Did we learn lessons from that shoot? Absolutely.
Of course.
Right? Is there stuff we would do different?
Absolutely.
Definitely. You know what I mean? There's agencies out there who day in and day out are shooting OTV ads, online TV ads, which is basically what we were shooting. And they have it down to a science and they know exactly what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
We're just two guys, right? and we have some experience. I don't want to discredit us.
Of course.
I've worked for years in a marketing agency. You have a really, really good sense of these things as well. We're both talented professionals. The production quality, I think, was awesome. Like, I think it was one of the better looking ones that we've done for sure. But, at the end of the day, when you have a team of like 15 people working on it who have all been through a lot,
there's just two guys.
And they all have totally different experiences and talents and
Yeah. And that's also why it's a little tough to ever like truly compare something apples to apples unless you know that the scenarios that they were in were similar. Right. It'd almost be funny to like give two creators the same prompt one day and the same equipment and just see the difference. Because that's, I think, more of like indicative of what, individual differences would manifest as, right? You'd see the difference there. But for something like that, who knows? Yeah. Did I answer the question there?
No, I just keep seeing it when I'm watching Hulu and I'm like, man, I just thought it was funny because it's like,
you gotta show me that. I gotta see what we're up against.
Yeah, if I find maybe it's on YouTube, but we'll find it.
I'm sure it is. Yeah.
There's nothing I hate more than a rushed shoot, and I can't imagine shooting something of that importance in one day.
In like less than 8 hours.
In like a rushed environment. That's tough.
Yeah. You got to make the best of what you have, what I mean? And what your client can afford to produce. Right. And I think ultimately, even though maybe their ad looks better, ours could still perform better. Right. Unless we actually know the back end metrics and what sort of like enrollment this drove. You can't ever truly say based on theirs looked better or theirs sounds better, right? At the end of the day, it just comes down to that. Because if ours was a 100th of the cost or a 10th of the cost of theirs, and we drove 80% of the same traffic they did, that's a win for us.
That's a win, yeah.
Much more value from us than there ever was from them.
Facts. Yeah, there's a lot more to go into it. That's a good point.
Yeah.
I guess, speaking of analytics, I don't know what, if anything, you do for like the motion graphic stuff, but do you ever dive into that side to almost present those analytics to the client to reassure them or justify what you're doing?
Like analytics from previous videos, or just generally best practices?
I guess both. Like to almost convince them like this type of video is going to be better based off of what we've done in the past. You can see these numbers here.
Yeah. In a situation where you actually have access to that information, I almost always try to get it. Oftentimes I feel, or I've experienced that clients are pretty guarded about that because some of that stuff is pretty proprietary. You can garner a lot about their marketing budget, their spend based on that kind of stuff. And so sometimes they keep those cards close to them because they don't want us to know that they're spending, $20,000 a day on Facebook ads when they're paying us, less than half of that for a video, right? So, but we won't get into that. So when I have it available, it's always helpful. And if you have a client that's really willing to like test and iterate with you, I think that's really valuable because it's really hard to tell if a video is going to perform well, right? Even if you've done something for one client that's worked well, it's no guarantee it's going to work well for the other client. You know what I mean? So that said, I mean, obviously I think there's generic best practices that I would encourage, right? For example, for an animated video, like you have to lead with something interesting, a hook, whether it's visually or in the, the voiceover side of things, got to hook people in. It's a bit of a no-brainer, right? There's length considerations. If you're going to make an 8-minute video, and this translates to video too, unless you have an audience that's qualified to be there, meaning like they have a vested interest to watch all the way through, chances are they're not. No. So it's probably better to consider a 60 or 90 second cut versus, a full length cut.
For sure.
So things like that I have in my toolbox of random facts to make it sound like I know what I'm talking about. But like, I don't always have the luxury of having, for example, like the click-through rate or like the retention rate or like where people dropped off, things like that.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people in the video world. No, I'm not calling anyone out. Like it works for them, but like they use the phrase of like, videos that like convert and like they will use, or I don't know, maybe they don't, but they claim to use metrics on their end to convince the client to prove that, videos with me are going to convert for your clients. Personally, I don't do that, but I know a lot of people who do.
No,
So it was that was my thought process of asking you that.
It's an interesting point, and that maybe that's something that I think I need to grow a little bit with my business too. Because generally, it's like once I hand in the video, I'm like, sayonara.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
But to your point, there are tools, right? Like for example, even where you host the video can give you some telling signs, right?
And
like
I guess it depends how closely you, as the creator of the video or the content, are post delivery. Like, if you're still in charge of it and managing it, then you'll have access to those numbers and you can show it. Yeah. But if you're just handing it off and they do it all, then you're not going to really be able to see that.
Besides, whether they come back or not.
Right. Exactly.
I guess there's always one way you can tell, right?
Always.
Yeah, that's true.
If you never hear from them again, chances are.
Yeah. But I mean, like, for example, like Vimeo or Wistia, there's different tools that have like free versions that you can use to host things. But then it's like you have to buy your client in on getting a hosted link versus the actual video file, all that kind of stuff. So I wouldn't quite say that's my area of expertise, but to your point, I'm sure there are people that do that really well. And it's a compelling thing to have, right? Like actual tangible data that says, look, these are my videos and this is, how they convert.
It's a powerful incentive to go with that person.
Yes.
If they can statistically prove that their content's going to help your business, then it's a no-brainer.
100%.
I guess my final kind of thing I wanted to touch on was that client communication stuff.
Sure.
So with our higher ed stuff, with all of your motion graphic stuff, what is your process like from, I guess, the initial outreach or them coming to you up until like that pre-production and even delivery? How closely do you work with the clients? What do you kind of say is all via email, Zoom calls?
That's a good question. Yeah. I think it differs a little bit, I think, from a video to an animation project. I think with an animation project, inherently, there needs to be a higher level of like meetings and like phone calls, things like that, to make sure that we're, on the same page. But I'll give, a sort of blended answer because I think there's still a lot of sort of like similarities.
Little overlap.
Between the two. Yeah. So like, once we get the contract signed, all that kind of stuff, generally I'll start with like a fresh kickoff. Oftentimes I'll have already done that with the client to, just quote out the project or like understand what they're trying to do. But I think that's a good opportunity to really like dive deep into that. And now knowing a little bit about what they're already trying to do, I think you as the creator have the luxury of doing more research, right? Looking at other things they've done, looking at other companies in their industry and really kind of coming up with, better sort of like industry knowledge of who they are, right? So in that meeting, again, we're reiterating goals. We're talking through what's most important in terms of like, what does success look like? All those kinds of things. For in a case of like a B2B company or someone that has like a pretty complex topic, generally either in that meeting or as a follow-up meeting, I like to have like a 30 or 60 minute deep dive where we're talking about everything, right? Like I want to know everything about whatever subject is going in this video. So in the case of cybersecurity, that the project I was mentioning earlier, it was really learning the platform ins and outs. Is what are they not? How does the technology work? What are common tropes that companies have or like problems that they would have that you would want to solve for? Getting all that kind of information, because I think you really need that in order to deliver something that hits all those points. You need to understand it. So, going forward from there, assuming the deliverables have already sort of been outlined a little bit, generally we'll start with just like a direction pitch. So like, for the, again, going back to the cybersecurity project, that's when we would be like, if there's a script involved, here's a rough draft of the script. How does this feel? Are we hitting the right points here? As a foundation, are the words and, the words being spoken correct? Yes. Okay, great. Let's move on from there. Then we'll think about the concept, right? Based on what we're saying here and based on what you've told me, here's how we can kind of interweave all that together, right? Or even with a video, right? It's like, here's the interview questions. Here's generally, I think, the direction we're going to take it. Here are the different things we want to shoot or we want to highlight. Once you have all that together, you can give them a better idea of what the deliverable is going to look like, which is ultimately, I think, the goal of that pre-production process, really making sure that they have a watertight understanding of what they're getting. Because in my experience, every time there's issues, it's always because you didn't do your homework in the beginning. It's always because something wasn't communicated, you weren't asking the right questions, and it's on you, right? Like you have to take responsibility for that. Obviously, there's other extenuating circumstances, but like most cases, it's because of that. So get everyone on the same page, do all that. I think next it's really important to establish a production schedule, a timeline, and be accountable to that, right? So saying, hey, you may not hear from me for a week, but just know it's because I'm doing X, Y, and Z. Let's expect or let's schedule a check-in here where I'll have this ready to show you, and then we can talk about it, see how it's working, right? In the case of a video, it might be like a day before the actual shoot, just sending an email and checking in, being like, here's where we're going to be. Here's our production schedule. Is this still all looking good? Again, just making sure everyone's on the same page and just doing that all throughout the production process until finally you get to a point where they're happy and you've delivered it. I think the real differentiator for client communication is when things go off the rails. I think that's when you really have the potential to set yourself apart as a vendor, right? Everyone's going to run into a situation like that where something goes wrong, there's a change in scope, this, that, and the other. I think it's how you respond that really makes the difference, right? And so in my experience, it's never a good thing to get on a call without a plan, right? It doesn't need to be the plan you use, but it's important to show that you're thinking about the problem and that you're actively trying to fix it or work around whatever circumstances they give you, whether it makes you red in the face and you want to punch a wall, or if it's not a big deal. Like, it's really important to come to the table, be collaborative, and come with solutions, right? So you can work through those problems. Ultimately, that's what, in my opinion, keeps people coming back, right? You deliver them a solid product and they know that you're reliable and that they can trust you in the event of something going wrong to fix it and still deliver something that satisfies what they're looking for. Yep. That's the,
and be honest.
That's the and be honest. Yeah. That's the take out the checkbook, money printer right there. Like that's really a specialty. And there's a lot that goes into that, right? It's a lot of responding in a timely manner. It's a lot of really, putting in the hours and really thinking through things before you present it to them, writing an email, editing it, changing the tone, the language, all those kinds of things that go into that. But, happy client, happy videographer. Right?
Yes.
That's what you want.
That was very insightful.
That was perfect.
Yeah. So I appreciate you being open about that.
Yeah.
There's one thing I wanted to go back to, which you said asking the right questions. And I was kind of wondering if you had maybe like 1, 2, or 3, like almost go-to questions that you ask every single time to ensure that, you're getting the information that you need.
Sure. Yeah. I don't know if I have I have like a couple template questions. Like, one I really like to ask is like, what does success look like? Like, paint me the picture of what the perfect video would look like to you, in terms of what it communicates, in terms of how it's received, in terms of what it does. Tell me about it, right? I also think it's important to ask sort of ascending questions, and maybe that's a weird term, but basically they're going to tell you, we want a video to do X, but in reality, there's things going on above that are really driving this, right? So for example, if it's like, we want to appeal to prospective students. Okay, well, why? Well, we're trying to get more out-of-state kids in. Oh, interesting. How come? Well, there's a initiative to, try to destigmatize UNH as an in-state school. Okay, interesting. So just trying to keep going up until you get to the real crux of the problem. Yeah. And sometimes it is just that simple. But I think having a full understanding or a clear sort of line of sight up and down helps you, do things in the video that even they weren't thinking about to shape the problem, right? So I think that's really important. Specifically for what I do, it's really important to understand the subject matter, right? And even, as something as simple as a restaurant, just doing some research into like their cuisine style, right? Like who's their chef? Where did they come from? What's their experience? Is this the owner's first restaurant? Like, do they have other restaurants? Learning as much as you can about these situations, I think gives you more ammunition to ask the right questions and to ultimately get down to something that's really valuable for the client, right? Really finding what that piece of information is. Sadly, I think a lot of it's just thinking on your feet based on what you're hearing, right? Like I wish it was as simple as like, here's the 3 questions that are surefire, get everything out of the way, and there's definitely things that can help you, but it's really just, it's a lot about what you guys are saying, active listening.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. What am I hearing and what does that tell me?
Yep.
I completely agree. I think I do have, a few kind of templatized questions.
Which is a good starting place. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I personally, it's again, different video versus animation, motion stuff, but something I try to always ask is if they have examples of the work that, like, if we're talking about something that we're trying to do, I ask for examples, or I ask like about their competitors and what they like, what their competitors are doing and what they don't like. So it's like, okay, we'll look at them. Everything that you guys don't like what they're doing, we will avoid. Everything you do like, we will build off of.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so it's not an exact science. And I think it's something, I think you guys were talking about this, maybe even you said this your last episode, but it just comes with experience. You know what I mean? Like you have to do enough reps to figure out what the common hidden things are that you need to be looking out for, or just being in those calls enough gives you a little bit of like a sixth sense of like what you should be kind of asking for. And obviously it gets easier, if you have repeat business and clients continue to come to you and do stuff like that. But it's a tough thing to do. And I think it's one of the most important things that you can do for a project is really doing your due diligence on that kickoff, discovery, and pre-production phase. Because that's just going to help everything flow faster and easier.
100%. Yeah. Now, are you recording your calls, or do you just like viciously take notes as you go?
I've done both. Generally, I'm more of a note taker than I am like a recording
am I.
person. That said, especially when people are like detailing the technical aspect of whatever we're doing, if there is one, like for example with the cybersecurity, I'm always recording that because there's no way I'm remembering all this information. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah. So for things like that, it's important to have as a reference, when you come back to it. But generally, I'm a note taker.
Yeah.
Me too. Probably chicken scratch the most, but it makes sense to me.
I like to type.
I'm a typer.
I like to type.
So you guys are typers?
I can type way faster than I can handwrite.
Me too.
And if I was trying to write as fast as they were talking, it would just be scribbles.
Me too. I would be like, what did I just write?
Is this like on the phone, like you're doing it like this, or you're like on the call, like typing?
Most of the time I do Zoom calls, but yeah, if it is on a phone call, I'll have my phone in my earbuds and I'll just be typing on a Google Doc. And if it's on a Zoom call, I'll do like a split screen, have the call on one side, my notes on the other, and I just type as I go.
I send myself emails.
You send yourself emails?
I send myself emails. I'll put the subject as like the name of the person I'm talking to and the date of the meeting.
Oh, I love that.
Okay.
And then I will take little notes and send it to myself. And then I never lose it.
That's really funny. I love that.
I live by Google Drive. Everything's in there.
I do Google Docs too, for sure. Yep.
Yeah. I got to give that a try.
Wait, do you not use Google?
No, I use Google Docs. I'm talking like typing notes versus yeah. No.
Yep.
I'm weird. I'm not that weird. Yeah.
I was gonna say, you don't use Google Drive.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. For me, it's just I can type way faster.
This is gonna sound weird, but I don't know if I necessarily love having 2 screens. And so I've had an aversion to that. Recently, I've plugged in a second screen and I'm getting better about it. But I think that's probably where that comes from, because it's like I want to keep the call up, and I don't want to have to like alt tab or whatever.
So I was like that too. Probably 3-4 years ago, I had a big monitor and I had my laptop to the side and I used both screens to edit and stuff.
Yep.
I got rid of it because I was like, I just can't do it anymore. So I've probably the last 3 years, I've only used my 16-inch MacBook for like everything. Yeah. And even now, I don't have a monitor. I just split my one laptop screen in half, use half of it in half.
Oh, true. Yeah. I guess I could do that.
That's all. Yeah, that's what
I've done that before too, like editing stuff.
Yeah.
Also, because I don't want my eye line to be like way off to like make it distracting for them.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I can see how for you it might be like almost necessary to have 2 screens.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know why it's taken me so long to get there, to be honest, but I'm just happy I'm there.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
To kind of wrap things up, I wanted to open the floor to you to feel free to ask us anything.
Ooh, okay.
Kind of turn the tables.
Yeah, here's a good question. So obviously I think we're all still sort of starting out a little bit and kind of getting our feet underneath us. For both of you, what was the biggest single lesson that you learned, in this sort of like venture that we're going through that has helped you the most?
If you want to go, feel free.
Lesson.
It could be like lesson, it could be story, it could be like thing you implemented, anything. But like, what was the biggest thing you did that made the most like noticeable difference in like your day to day, whatever that looks like?
I think I have something. I think with the fear of sounding super guru-y, I promise you I'm not trying to be. It's something I truly believe. It's all about a mentality for me. Like when I first realized that, again, it's going to sound so cliche, that like I can do anything if I put all of my effort into it. I can do anything. And like, it sounds so simple, but no one does it because everyone gets distracted. And like we're human, things come up. But if you really want to do something, like if your goal is to do XYZ, like be a great videographer, build a media agency, but there are so many things in your way, if that is truly what you want, you will find a way to be able to prioritize everything in your life to get that one goal accomplished.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that like prioritization of going after that one big goal of like being successful in this industry, and like the mentality of if I just don't half-ass it, if I don't get distracted with other things, I know for a fact I can accomplish it, even if it seems super far away.
Yeah.
Preach.
Honestly, that's very similar to what my answer was going to be. And someone asked me this earlier this week, actually, so that's why it's at the top of my mind. I think the biggest lesson that owning a business has taught me is how to remove self-doubt and how to believe in myself. You're worried about sounding guru-y. I'm worried about sounding corny, but I like went into this business. I like just jumped in head first, and I like didn't know a goddamn thing about what I was doing.
Sure.
Like a lot of us, I'm sure. But I was able to just start and learn from experiences and do a whole bunch of fun things and work really, really, really hard. And at one point I was able to look up after the first year of my business and I was like, holy shit, like look at all the cool things that I did over the last year. Like I can do it, you know?
Absolutely.
So I was able to actually believe in myself and know that I could do it.
I think those are both really great answers, because I also think like I never wanted to be a freelancer. And like, if you ask my old coworkers, they're like, oh, like, would you ever go freelance? And I was like, no, like who would want that?
Yeah.
And it's not until, for me, I was almost forced into that situation. And it's like, fall off the cliff, learn to fly on the way down. But like, you're so right. There's so much, both of you are so right. There's so much growth that comes along with that. And you have to figure out what's important, how to prioritize it. And then you have to have the self-belief aspect of it to know like things may not be going great right now, or like this may not be what I want to be doing right now, but like I'm going to stick through this and I'm going to figure out how to work through this and I'm going to make it better and I'm going to make it into something that's my own, right? Like it's a really special process, I think, building your business, you know what I mean? And it's something that most people don't get to experience. So whether you're in business for the rest of your working career, or if, I'm done in 2 years, like I'll never regret taking that chance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely agree.
I think you told me the last time we were talking is that even when I might not be super busy with like client work, I will always be doing something to better my like skills or like
100%.
something,
Yes.
like keep continuous learning.
Yeah.
Like I will never do nothing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And you see it. I mean, you see it all the time, right? Like, at least for me, like having worked with a myriad of people and having seen like a lot of what the internals of businesses look like, you can very easily tell people that have just sort of stopped, right? They're like, I'm happy with my skill set. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I think you limit yourself when you do that, you know? And if you don't ever push yourself to the point where you're really growing and continuously evolving and really keeping up and like basically forcing yourself to, you know, interact with these like new and difficult scenarios, you know, you stagnate and you hit a plateau. And whether that's in business or not, like it's important in life to continuously push yourself farther. Right. So
Agreed.
Preach. Mic drop.
Mic drop.
All right, I guess
I love that.
pretty much wraps up. That's a good way to wrap
That was
it up.
perfect.
Awesome.
So once again, thank you for coming on today. It was really fun talking.
Yes.
And you and I have been talking a long time about like having you on.
Long time coming.
Like,
yeah.
he was like been our biggest fan.
Aw.
I listen to every episode. I love
Thank you.
it. Yeah.
We appreciate
Yeah.
it.
So it's, well, I appreciate you
Yeah.
guys letting me on. It really is an honor, you know, to be here, and it's something I love talking about. Hopefully, I didn't talk too much.
Oh my
but,
God,
you
no,
know,
it was
yeah,
perfect.
no, it was
It was
amazing.
amazing.
And we'll have you on again in the future.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Where can people find you? On LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn, yeah. My website is my name, so SeanBrodeur.com, LinkedIn.com/Sean-Michael.Brodeur. And yeah,
Got that middle name in there.
I got that's how it is in LinkedIn, but did have to get the middle name in there. And I mean, you can find me on Instagram, SeanBrodeur18, but I don't really post my work on there. It's more of just like my personal gram,
Got it.
but coming soon. Hopefully there's more.
Ooh, okay.
Ooh, a teaser. We love a teaser. Sweet.
All right. Well, thank you again. That pretty much
Thank
wraps
you.
up this episode. Make sure to give us a 5-star review if you are listening, and like us and subscribe on YouTube.
Yeah.
With that, we will see you in the next episode.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.